Welcome back. This month, we have seen two very different high-profile shootings. There was yesterday's tragic shooting at a mall in Oregon. And on December 1st, Kansas City Chiefs linebacker Jovan Belcher shot his girlfriend and mother of his child to death before killing himself. His funeral was today in Long Island. After his death, we soon discovered that Belcher had legally purchased a gun he used that day. Just the night before, he made a joke about the 8 guns he owned. Belcher's death prompted this controversial commentary from sportscaster Bob Costas.
In the aftermath of the nearly unfathomable events in Kansas City, that most mindless of sports cliches was heard yet again. Something like this really puts it all in perspective. You want some actual perspective on this? Well, a bit of it comes from the Kansas City-based writer Jason Whitlock, with whom I do not always agree, but who today said it so well that we may as well just quote or paraphrase from the end of his article. Our current gun culture, Whitlock wrote, ensures that more and more domestic disputes will end in the ultimate tragedy, and that more convenience store confrontations over loud music coming from a car will leave more teenage boys bloodied and dead. Handguns do not enhance our safety. They exacerbate our flaws, tempt us to escalate arguments, and bait us into embracing confrontation rather than avoiding it. In the coming days, Jovan Belcher's actions and their possible connection to football will be analyzed. Who knows? But here, wrote Jason Whitlock, is what I believe. If Jovan Belcher didn't possess a gun, he and Cassandra Perkins would both be alive today.
Now, when you consider that among the world's wealthiest countries, 80% of all gun deaths are American deaths. And when you consider that the U.S. has the highest gun ownership rate in the world, you have to ask, does the U.S. have a gun culture problem? So, Vince, I will start with you. Answer the question for me.
A gun culture problem? No. I don't believe we do. We live in a country where guns have been part of our culture and our fabric since the beginning of the country. It's a constitutional right to be able to own a gun in this country. It was important to the founding fathers to put that language in the Constitution. It's the second item that they put into that Constitution. And I'm not going to get into this debate where we're going to diminish any of the tragedies that have recently happened or have happened in recent memory, but certainly there's some sort of cultural problem that is involving drugs, that is involving guns. And I think more importantly, I grew up upstate. I grew up one town over from Remington Arms, the oldest gun maker in the country. Everyone owns a gun in the area that I grew up with. Everyone from the time you're old enough to aim, you buy a gun, you hunt. It becomes a family tradition that gets passed down. So as far as us having a culture of guns, we certainly do. But somewhere along the way, there is a disconnect between what the real problem is in society and because we have access to guns, they get used. With the tragedy that happened in Kansas City, why aren't we talking about mental illness more? Why aren't we talking about drug use and steroid use? Why aren't we talking about many of the other things? And for Bob Costas to make that comment at the end that if he didn't own guns, she'd still be alive, that's a ridiculous comment.
But
You're saying he couldn't use his hands? He could have used his hands. He could have used.
But he did.
But he could have. I'm saying just because the option was there doesn't make the gun the problem.
Nick?
Look, I think we have a gun culture problem. I mean, how many more of these mass shootings have to happen before we wake up and realize it? I think there's a big difference between allowing people to have to own a gun than making it illegal for somebody to go down to Walmart and buy a semi-automatic thing that can kill lots of people within a short period of time. I mean, there's no reason for the average citizen to have that. So, I think we've got to have, as terrible as these tragedies are, I don't believe that now is the time not to talk about this stuff. I think we have to talk about it, and we have to figure out how to prevent people from killing lots of people in a short period of time. I think the Kansas City thing was a tragedy. Ultimately, that was one person. I think what we need to do is figure out how to stop the mass shootings.
Mass shootings. So does that mean at least the country should have a discussion and more perhaps an agreement that you don't need assault weapons on the streets throughout America.
You don't necessarily need a 12-round magazine clip either. And I probably kind of fall somewhere in between both Vince and Nick on this, honestly, from the point of view that growing up upstate, same thing. You know, I mean, that's definitely part of the culture that, you know, hunting and riflemanship or whatever. And I was in the military, so I shot a lot of different kinds of weapons. But you certainly don't need an assault weapon to go hunting. And you certainly don't need a handgun typically to engage in some of these sports. But on the flip side, you know, look, people who like to go to gun ranges and fire weapons safely, you know, I believe that should be their right. So, you know, I'll be honest with you, I don't know what the answer is from the point of view that I think that people do have a right to have guns. I do think that people can use them responsibly. There should be more background checks. There should be more things in place to make sure that people who are not equipped to have guns don't have them. But there's no easy solution. But I disagree with Vince from the point of view that I thought Costas was very elegant in his remarks. And from the point of view that a gun does allow for that split-second decision to just pull the trigger. Whereas if I'm going to kill somebody with a knife or with my hands, it's more intimate. And I can stop. You pull the trigger, it's done. So, you know, I think it's an important discussion. I don't think that we have the leadership in Washington, candidly, neither from the president especially, and he is the leader, and he's basically been silent on this. Talk about progressive agendas. He's been zero on this. And simple things like that was in the Brady gun law, like the magazine clip thing, doesn't even get brought up again. You know, and
Okay. Well, you mentioned where we're going with this, and that turns us to the White House, but also the Congress. Do they have the will to tackle guns in America? It's a question I asked New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman earlier today.
There seems to be a pretty broad consensus that some prudent, non-intrusive forms of gun regulation are required, and I've been working on this along with New York's Mayor Bloomberg and other elected officials for some time. I hope the folks in Washington are going to have the courage to take action. There are some simple things we can do that will save a lot of lives, and I think it's important for everyone to understand that and for our political leaders to step up to the plate.
Okay, Vince, the will. The will. I listened to what you said. You don't believe that the country has a problem, I believe was your point.
It's more systematic than it's just a gun problem, I guess.
But is there a will in Washington to say that things might be out of control?
I don't think I don't see it as an issue that I would see the Congress taking up. I mean, it goes back to kind of what Dave said. I don't think you see anybody that's, as far as a leader, whether it's the president or even someone in Congress or somebody that's really taking this issue up, that is becoming that leader that's going to galvanize enough support that they're going to bring this up as a major issue.
But how many people have to die? I mean, people at a movie theater, and it becomes yesterday's news.
Let me ask you. Gun violence is up, but gun deaths are down. I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal this weekend. Right. They had a big article on it that we're getting so adept at treating people with gun wounds that actually in New York, more people are getting shot, but thank God more and more of them are living.
But look at what happened in Brooklyn, New York, just the other day. The woman visiting her loved one at a hospital. She steps outside to smoke a cigarette. She's shot fatally in the neck. I mean, these things are happening more and more.
But how many more laws on the books will stop that shooting? How many more laws on the book
are not going to... If you have sensible, like the Attorney General said, if you have sensible legislation, you can reduce it. Nobody's talking about a solution to get these to zero. We're talking about keeping it out of the hands of people who are mentally ill. Remember the guy at Virginia Tech? He was mentally ill. Remember the guy in Arizona? He was mentally ill.
Well, okay.
So more background checks, other things. I think we've got to. I agree with you 100% that we need to address mental illness.
You're making the point, though. You're making the point that it's not a gun problem. It's not a gun culture problem. There's other things that lead to the use of that gun in an illegal manner, and that's exactly what
you're always going to have mentally ill people. We need to do more to address mental health, but you also need to do more to keep guns out of the hands of people who are mentally ill.
And how do you do that? The first thing you have to do is identify a mentally ill individual. That means more outreach.
Well, we can have a bipartisan agreement that we need to identify who's mentally ill, and we need to keep guns out of their hands. And I think we'd be on the same page.
I would love, and I don't have these numbers. I wish I did. The number of gun bills versus the number of mental health bills on the rolls right now. There are a ton of gun bills that aren't effective. You can't. And to your point,
You
to
know
your
what?
point earlier,
You
you
know what,
cannot.
guys,
You
I-
cannot just walk into Walmart and buy a gun. It's not that
I've
easy.
got to take a break, and I respect your different opinions, but what I'm thinking about right now is the next mother, whether it be in an American city or the suburb, where a police officer has to go to that mother or to that family and say that your child has just been murdered, the victim of gun violence. I mean, something has to give. But on that note, it is time for a break. When we return, we will dig into the race for mayor of New York City. Stay with us.